Football is a dirty game. Despite all the analytics and advanced systems that have evolved the sport, the battle is still often decided by who can break their opponent's will. In the ruthless nature of American football, there are things happening on a down-to-down basis that fall into what I like to call the gray area, a place where the rules aren't exactly clear. Whether a play is clean or dirty is often subjective, and it usually comes down to how old you are and how macho you want to act. And here's a few examples. Punching at the ball to try and dislodge it. Who doesn't love a good peanut punch? But damn, who wants to get punched in the arm? Starting a fight, and then flopping when they barely retaliate to try and draw a penalty. Tackling a player way after the whistle because you're finishing the play. Or how about that wrestling throwdown tackle that has a 50-50 chance of breaking the dude's neck? During a practice in 8th grade, I watched this dude Devin body slam my friend Montana into the ground, and for a moment, we legit thought that he was paralyzed. The coaches had to call the ambulance and everything, and luckily he ended up being okay, but he did have to look like Tourette's guy for a few weeks. Anyways, the debate around football has always had so much to do with what's the right amount of violence. With every rule change made in favor of protecting players, a certain number of people respond negatively, saying the game has become too soft. So what exactly constitutes a player who's dirty versus someone who's just tough and hard-nosed? Well, let me take a crack at it. I've come up with 3 dirty archetypes, if you will. And all these archetypes are very closely related and can cross over with one another. The first archetype we will go over is the headhunter.
My objective when tackling someone was to put them out of that game. I didn't want to injure them, but I wanted them to hurt and not be able to finish that game. They could play next week, but that was my objective every time I tried to tackle somebody.
James Harrison is straight up one of the most intimidating players in NFL history. His career can be thought of in 4 different eras, the first of which is the survival era. Initially, Harrison was an undersized and undrafted linebacker who fought for years just to be on an NFL practice squad. For 3 years, he appeared in just 1 NFL game and was cut 4 times. Finally, he broke through in 2004 and became a rotational player for the Steelers. This is when he entered his second era, the rise to stardom. This is where he made his journey from rotational player to the Defensive Player of the Year in 2008. And in that year's Super Bowl, he had one of the greatest plays we've ever seen. After reaching the pinnacle of football, Harrison continued to dominate. However, he did start to build a reputation for personal fouls. This is where he entered his third era, becoming a villain. In 2010, Harrison racked up an estimated $120,000 in fines. He had numerous moments, like flipping Vince Young, the late hit on Drew Brees, and spearing Ryan Fitzpatrick. These all added fuel to the fire of Harrison's reputation as a dirty player. But his game versus the Browns on October 17th was easily the worst.
Uh-oh, and that is not good news for the Browns. He took a hit. Woodley got him first, then Harrison came in and got him at the ear hole. Timeout. 10. 1st and 10. Bell picks up Polamalu. Asaqua was drilled. Oh my goodness. Harrison again.
If I had knew they were going to fine me $75,000, dude, I would have did everything I could to try and make that the most grotesque hit that the NFL had ever seen, because I only gave him 30 to 40%.
The summer after his controversial 2010 season, James Harrison sparked controversy after being featured in Men's Journal. The article was titled, quote, "James Harrison, Confessions of an NFL Hitman." In this article, he talked about his identity and play style. He slammed NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, calling him a crook and a puppet. Harrison also criticized his quarterback, Big Ben, and other players like Brian Cushing. Although he did apologize for these remarks, it was clear that Harrison stood by the way he played. His on-field aggression would continue. He would have another incident versus the Browns the following year, where he absolutely devastated Colt McCoy.
And now he throws at the last second and completed it as he got planted. And I mean planted.
With the narrative around concussions rising around that time, James Harrison was a major catalyst in the rule changes towards making the game safer. Rules, in fact, he was not a fan of. Of course, he's now in his 4th era, which is his social media days. He's been showing off his insane workouts for about a decade or more now, so that just only adds to the intimidation factor. Now, even though James Harrison is a famous recent example of a headhunter, he's certainly not the most notorious headhunter in NFL history. I made a video on the Soul Patrol, the legendary Raider secondary during the 70s, about a year ago. And for this next player, I'm gonna let a section from that video play, which has to do with that secondary's most intimidating player, Jack Tatum. Drafted by Oakland in 1971, Tatum immediately made his presence felt. He drew comparisons to Dick Butkus following his first game due to knocking out 2 Colts tight ends. This set the tone for the rest of his career. Known as the Assassin for his aggressive and physical style, Tatum was a 3-time Pro Bowler. And Tatum's style of play was controversial at times, as he was involved in several incidents that sparked debates about player safety in the NFL.
Y'all be careful.
Amongst countless examples of these hits, one stands out above the rest.
On August 12, 1978, Tatum delivered the hit that would make him infamous during a preseason game against the Patriots.
Grogan will put it in the air. Oh, the intended receiver is Stingley. The man he ran into was Jack Tatum, and Stingley was down.
In a preseason game versus the Patriots, Jack Tatum made a hit on wide receiver Stingley that left him paralyzed. Tatum later said that he had made a hit like this thousands of times in practice, except this time, the hit caused irreversible damage. This hit changed the course for a few things: the lives of both Tatum and Stingley, as well as the direction of safety for the NFL. Starting with Stingley, he gained very limited mobility, but ultimately lived the rest of his life as a quadriplegic. For Tatum, the hit changed him. According to a friend, quote, "For years, he was almost a recluse."
It did affect your play last year?
Sure, it affected my play. Tragic accident like that's going to affect you, if you're involved in it.
The two players never spoke after the hit, although Tatum did say that he tried to visit Stingley once, but was turned away by Stingley's family. Tatum was always cast as a villain after this, largely due to the lack of remorse when talking about the way he played in different settings. Ultimately, Stingley forgave Tatum for the incident, but others struggled to do the same. When Tatum had passed away suddenly back in 2010, Stingley's former teammate Steve Grogan said the following, quote, "I have a hard time trying to find something nice to say. I just can't do it."
Jack Tatum is widely recognized as one of the most intimidating players ever, and considering he played in the ruthless 1970s, he's got to be considered as the most notorious headhunter in NFL history. Now, before we continue, it's that time of year. We're getting closer and closer to football season. It's never too early to get your tickets, and I'm considering going to a Falcons game in the fall. And I'm going to score me a sweet deal through today's sponsor, SeatGeek. With over 28 million downloads, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app. There are more than 70,000 events every single day on SeatGeek, including concerts, sports, festivals, and more. You can either get your football tickets now or go to an event in the summer, like a MLB game. And SeatGeek has your back. Every single deal is rated on a scale from 1 to 10, so you know you're getting a good deal, with the green dots meaning good and the red dots meaning bad. Plus, every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee. And you know I came through for you guys. Use code KTO for $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek. That's $20 off your first purchase using code KTO. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app, and have the code automatically added to your account so you can use it later. Shout out to SeatGeek for the sponsor. Now let's get back to the video. Now, for the second archetype in this video, I like to call it the antagonistic asshole. This is the type of dude that is similar to a headhunter, but when it comes to the way they play, there are some differences. While a headhunter tends to come off as cold-blooded and has a do what I gotta do attitude, the antagonistic asshole tends to come off as rather proud of the way he played. For this archetype, the gray area is their home. Side note, please forgive me on the way I pronounced Dobler's last name, as I did record this previously and didn't realize the way I pronounced it until afterwards.
I don't know if I ever really broke rules. I think that I was a master at playing in the gray area of every rule ever made.
Back in 1977, that man, Conrad Dobler, was dubbed Pro Football's dirtiest player by Sports Illustrated because he did stuff like this all the time.
Here comes a quick right. Oh, right into the...
And take a look at Dobler unloading the haymaker on Olsen.
I tell you, he's a mean daddy.
What stands out about Dobler was that he played in an era where football was basically legalized fighting. Brawls broke out all the time. Dudes were taking people's heads off. And Dobler still found a way to receive this moniker as the dirtiest in the NFL. Dobler famously used tactics such as stepping on opponents, eye gouging, gut punching, head slapping, finger biting, and leg whipping.
You know, a lot of people have talked about the leg whips and things like this, but I always thought we should have gotten points for that because I thought those were great athletic moves.
Conrad Dobler fought every day in practice for at least 3 years. I never saw anything like it. He fought every day, and he fought anybody that got in his way, and he did that until he developed into a good football player.
This quote is perfect because it gets into the weeds of how a player develops into the asshole. When the game requires this much athleticism, skill, and strength, and you don't measure up, you're often going to find other ways to survive. Here's a quote from an ESPN article that talked about Dobler's line of thinking after he was cut and brought back as a rookie. Quote, "It was then that he stumbled across what he considered the keys to professional football. He realized that you do not play it, you survive it. So in the interest of survival, he created a monster." To put it simply, there are two types of intimidating players. You have the Lawrence Taylors of the world, and you have the Conrad Doblers of the world. The Lawrence Taylors of the world will just dominate you in every way, and there's just nothing you can do about it. Whereas the Conrad Doblers of the world will punch you in the chest if you try to swat down a pass.
When I jump up to try to knock down a pass, the solar plexus is just so inviting.
The goal of a guy like Lawrence Taylor is to dominate you. The goal of a Conrad Dobler is to get under your skin.
And Tom Banks starts yelling, "You made him cry, you made him cry." I said, "Hey, would you calm down? I got him right where I want him."
And Dobler's most famous example of getting under another player's skin came against Hall of Famer Merlin Olsen. After antagonizing him nonstop, Olsen lost his cool for the first time in his 15-year career.
Now, let's be honest about it. Conrad Dobler was a self-styled and a factual dirty player. That was his way of compensating for a lack of some basic skills.
Merlin lost his poise, and that's what bothers him more than anything else.
Now, maybe it's because of the era he played in, but I think Dobler is seen mostly in a positive light by football fans today. But for the next player in this category, the same thing can't be said, because this dude takes things up a notch.
I'm pissed, and I'm down there just trying to rip that ball out of his hands. And all I could get was a finger. And at that time, I thought it was his, but just whatever it was, I just snapped it. And I could hear a scream at the bottom of the pile.
You broke his finger and you thought to yourself, good. He's not going to be so effective anymore.
At that time, yes.
Man, that's cold.
That's awful.
By the end of his playing days, Bill Romanowski embodied more than just the antagonistic asshole archetype. He was also a headhunter, as well as our third archetype that I'll mention in a bit. This dude was just a straight psychopath on the field. When Romanowski was drafted by the Niners back in 1988, he immediately saw what success at the highest level looked like. As a rotational player, he was a part of back-to-back Super Bowl championships to start his career. And as a rookie, he was called out by a former legendary teammate who was upset at him for not retaliating at an opponent. Quote, "This is a game about respect," Lott said. "If you let someone do that again, I'll come after you myself." This moment proved to be a crucial one on what began to develop Romo's on-field persona.
During one practice in your second season, you broke an unwritten rule, probably an unwritten rule of the entire NFL. You hit Jerry Rice.
So Romanowski learned the culture of the NFL pretty early on, and he had a lot of success. He was mostly a starter for 16 seasons and had a crazy consecutive starting streak at 243 games. However, later in his career, the ugly side of his aggressive style of play began to rear its ugly head. In 1995, in a game versus the Cardinals, Romanowski was ejected and fined for kicking Larry Centers in the head. In 1997, Romanowski broke quarterback Kerry Collins' jaw in the preseason, and he was fined $20,000 for the incident. That same season, he spit in J.J. Stokes' face on national TV. In 1999, Romanowski was fined over $40K for 3 illegal hits and a punch thrown at Tony Gonzalez. He reportedly told Gonzalez, quote, "I don't care, I've got a lot of money." In 2002, Romanowski dislocated former teammate Shannon Sharpe's elbow, and as you can tell from the clip, it was far from an accident. While Romanowski fit the T of the overly aggressive football player, when he started taking steroids, it turned things up a notch. The psychotic tendencies can really be noticed when you see how proud he is looking back at the things he did.
I remember when I threw a microwave oven at Dexter Carter, and then jacked him up against a Coke machine. And, I ripped off his gold chain and, a bunch of different things. But hey, went out to practice that day, had the best practice of my life.
Now, Romanowski's on-field persona was well documented as him being a dirty player. But in 2003, the worst of it came to pass. Romo attacked and injured his own teammate Marcus Williams during a scrimmage. This altercation forced Williams to retire. He later sued Romanowski over what he deemed as roid rage. There's a reason all those years ago that I said that this dude was the dirtiest player in NFL history. And like I said a few minutes ago, Romo embodied not just this archetype, but the other two as well. He was a headhunter, as well as a hothead, our third and final archetype. The line between a hothead and these other archetypes is a little blurred. Someone who's a hothead tends to be a headhunter or an antagonizer. However, there's still a clear distinction. While a headhunter tends to play the game in a certain way because he thinks it's going to help him be more successful, a hothead just sort of loses his cool and will rage out in a single moment.
He jams his helmet into the turf to start with about 3 times, and then at the end of this is when he makes the kick.
Ndamukong Suh is easily one of the most terrifying NFL players ever. His first name literally means House of Spears. His great-grandpa, who had shared his same name, was 7'3". At 6'4" and over 310 pounds, Suh was a terrifying combination of being freakishly huge while also being a hothead, and this incident on Thanksgiving in 2011 shed a huge spotlight into this. He was ejected from that game, and later suspended for 2 games. This had been the 5th career time he had been disciplined for on-field conduct. Funny enough, he claimed that he didn't stomp him, but rather was just trying to get his balance back. By that point, Suh had been voted the dirtiest player in the league by other NFL players, winning the vote in a landslide over second place, James Harrison. And the following Thanksgiving, he would have another incident.
Way down there. Ndamukong Suh, oh boy, he gets kicked.
Suh's kick to Matt Schaub's groin resulted in a $30,000 fine. Suh once again denied that it was intentional, just like the stomp he did the previous Thanksgiving. Once again, he was voted the dirtiest player in the NFL. The following year, he would receive the biggest fine for an in-game incident in NFL history.
En route, it bounces off the receiver's hands right into the hands of the linebacker.
Suh threw a block on John Sullivan, which resulted in a personal foul and negated a pick 6. Afterwards, due to his continuous behavior of breaking rules, he was fined $100,000. These weren't the only incidents that season, but the one everyone remembers along with the stomp happened in 2014.
Going to have to do, well, he gets stepped on right at the end of that play. I didn't catch that, and it looks like maybe that's what it was.
Twice he gets stepped on. That's Suh.
This led to a 1-game suspension, which was later reversed and changed to a $70,000 fine. From 2011 to 2017, Suh was a menace on the field, constantly being fined for his in-game actions. After that, he still continued to be successful in the NFL, he just didn't have as many bad moments. In 2019, I was standing about 10 feet from him on the sidelines at the NFC Championship, and I was terrified. This dude was massive. Suh was certainly a hothead. However, the most notorious hothead in recent memory is no doubt Vontaze Burfict. As a former 5-star prospect that went to Arizona State, Burfict became known for his physical aggression while in college. But he did cross the line into dirty play all the time. His college coach said he had never seen so many fights caused by one player. His personal fouls and unnecessary roughness calls had gotten out of hand during his career. He famously blew a game versus Stanford due to unnecessary roughness penalties. At one point, he was considered a top linebacker prospect for the NFL draft. But after a lot of these incidents that happened in college, and other off-the-field issues, as well as a poor combine performance and disastrous interviews, this led to Burfict going undrafted. But he did sign with the Bengals immediately and worked his way into the starting linebacker role as a rookie, and the following year is when his aggressive nature showed its pros and cons in the NFL. On one hand, he led the league in tackles and was named second-team All-Pro. On the other, he was starting to rack up a bunch of fines. He was fined $31,000 for 2 incidents in one game: a hit on a defenseless receiver and intentionally struck an opponent in the groin. That season, he totaled 9 personal fouls, 6 of those being unnecessary roughness calls, and he was fined just under $60,000 in 2013. The following year, in a game versus the Panthers, Burfict intentionally twisted the ankles of Greg Olsen and Cam Newton, both of whom had been dealing with ankle issues that season.
Instances like that are so clearly premeditated that he had in his mind, if he had those opportunities, that he was going to try to attack not only guys' legs, but guys who are coming off ankle problems specifically. There's no room for it. Guys like that don't learn from that stuff.
At this point, Burfict's reputation was making him one of the most hated players in the NFL. The following year, he was fined nearly $70,000 for 2 unsportsmanlike conduct penalties versus the Steelers. And then, in 2016, he had his most infamous moment. With a 1-point lead in the playoffs, and in a favorable situation, the Bengals just needed to hold the Steelers to less than 15 yards and keep them in bounds since they had no timeouts. But after an overthrow by Big Ben, Burfict laid a devastating hit on Antonio Brown.
It seemed like 2 Vontez perfect, and yes.
Oh my goodness.
Many point to this moment as a clear indicator in the erratic changes in AB's personality following the hit. Not only this, but it also blew the game for the Bengals, and Burfict went on to be suspended for 3 games, costing him $500,000. Following the incident, Burfict was officially recognized as the dirtiest player in the league, and the next few years would only add fuel to this fire. Burfict was fined or suspended 9 times in a 4-year span after the AB playoff incident. And after an illegal hit on Jack Doyle, this was the last straw. Burfict was suspended for the rest of the 2019 season, and he would never play in the NFL again. Now, one of the most satisfying things in sports is when one of these bullies gets bullied, or a player like this gets a taste of his own medicine.
In that direction, dumped it off to Bell, who got a big